Canada and the US both have their own major budget stories going on, and the entire world is waiting to hear what happens with the Supreme Court case, what that means for trade moving forward. However, we're seeing a major tale of two cities here, because assuming the US budget is approved, it means the US will take off and see major positive momentum moving forward. Whereas if the Canadian one gets passed, 2026 has the potential to be the worst year in Canadian history. I think that's when we are going to see the major announcements take place. And unfortunately, I gotta agree with Ron Butler today. We know I'm a certified Ron Butler hater, but he made a good point today. And included in the 2026 major announcements, Quebec is not only dancing around the fact that they want to leave anymore, it is now a stated goal from the federal party that they want Quebec to be its own country. This is getting wild out here. There's a lot to talk about in today's video, so let's get into it.
I hope we're going to win that case. I think it's one of the most important cases in the history of our country. So much evolves around tariffs as a defensive mechanism for our country. Tariffs have made us rich in terms of national security. They've made us secure. And you know, if you have economic strength, that's also, if you have a lack of economic strength, that's national security also. But we have great national security because of those tariffs. So I think it would be devastating if we lost that ruling.
He is right thinking it'd be devastating if they lose the ruling. I do think this is one of the biggest cases in the entire world right now. Everybody's paying attention to it. It's one of those things that the entire world just wants clarity on. And we're talking trillions in global trade. So yeah, it's a pretty big deal.
Vice President Trump today in the Supreme Court case on his tariffs. The president and his team says they need reciprocal tariffs to stop unfair trade deals that hurt America, and plus to get more jobs and to stop the fentanyl crisis, even to stop wars like Russia's war in Ukraine funded by Russian oil. Let's bring in American Majority CEO Ned Ryan. Ned, what do you think of this case before the Supreme Court? Some of the justices sounded skeptical.
Yes, they did. They sounded a little skeptical of his invoking his emergency powers. But I would say they also kind of weren't dismissive of the argument that the executive has the ability to invoke his Article 2 authority on foreign policy. And I think Trump made a great point that our economic strength is a national security.
I definitely agree with that. When Trump said that, you know, a strong economy has to do with security and all of that, it makes sense. And we've got a clip in a second that is proving not only did this work, there's actually an announcement showing it had a direct impact on what could be national security.
Issue as well. I argue our manufacturing base and a lot of things that we do with our economy are truly the arsenal of freedom for the rest of the world. So we're talking about some pretty big issues here. So I hope that SCOTUS understands beyond the emergency economic powers that Trump is invoking. I would argue, Liz, the Trade Act of 1962, specifically Section 232, the Trade Act 1974, Sections 122 and 301, I think give the president the ability to impose tariffs in a variety of circumstances.
I think we know that they've got backup plans, and assuming this is, you know, struck down by the courts, which would be a blow, it would not be good. I think we'd see the markets probably react to that. But like I said, when it comes to the announcements that we're seeing that are huge wins for the U.S., showing it's going to be really lifting off in 2026, 2027, this was actually a very important announcement.
I'm sorry, South Carolina, I should say. This is where the EVAC facility is. This is a rare earth mineral processing center here now in the United States. It starts production this week. I'm with the Treasury Secretary here. You know, you are fresh off the negotiations with China. Rare earth minerals was a big deal with this. We are seeing now the first processing plant in the United States here with EVAC. What message does this send?
Ed, President Trump got into office January 20th, immediately issued an executive order on rare earths, and here we are, it's November, and I have this to take back to the Oval, to President Trump. This is the first magnet made in the U.S., I believe.
Not only did this rare earth processing facility get started, get approved, get into production, we'll get into that in a second, he's holding it in his hand. That's how dynamic and that's how quick the U.S. economy is able to reindustrialize and able to actually capture the benefits of the tariffs. And this is the whole thing, that the biggest pushback was, oh, well, the U.S. doesn't even have the ability to process these things or reindustrialize. He's got the proof in his hands, and this is just the start. These things take time. That's why he's talking about 2026 and 2027, because we are seeing factories being outfitted and being staffed and all of that. They just get approval so fast there. The market is so dynamic.
25 years. In 25 years. So rare earth magnet problem, we're on our way to solving the Chinese chokehold that they have.
Think about that.
This fantastic facility here in Sumter, South Carolina. They started it 18 months ago. The state of South Carolina, Governor McMaster, was fantastic. They said it took them 8 weeks to get permits. They couldn't believe how fast it was. And this
8 weeks to get permits is so impressive. If you compare that to Canada, it's 8 weeks just to get the consultants to respond to an email, and they charge you the entire time.
This is President Trump's all hands on deck for this national security emergency.
These tariffs hold and this reindustrialization does happen. The US could be going gangbusters, especially if they're able to get this budget and spending approved, and we can see the Democrats are holding it up. And this is why I'm saying it's a tale of two cities, and we'll get into the Canadian stuff in a second. This budget getting approved is like rocket fuel into the US economy, and it's actually in a good way, and we'll get into it because Pierre calls out the liberal budget in Canada, and this is where the economic principles differ so much. It's so frustrating that the Democrats are holding this up on something that can be debated at a later date.
Action coming in from the White House as a shutdown stretches into day 38. President Trump telling Americans that the flight cancellations are to ensure the safety of every American. And they've got to get that message out there. Senior White House correspondent Peter Ducey live from the North Lawn. Peter, how's the communications challenge on this going?
Dana, building off of Grady's report at Reagan Airport just now, this shutdown is not happening in a vacuum. So folks here at the White House say that a chain reaction of negative events has already been triggered.
The impact on the economy is far worse than we expected because it's gone on for so long. And so there are now like Goldman estimates that it's over 1% or 1.5% of GDP. I will say travel and leisure is a place that's really being heavily hit right now. And if it continues to get hit, if the air travel thing goes south for another week or two, then you could say that they would have at least a near-term downturn.
I mean, what do you do about it?
Flights are a big issue. Obviously, they're always trying to push all the stories like, oh, international travel to the U.S. is just down. Nobody wants to go because of tariffs. So there are people, like I said, there's Canadians all the time who say they're not going to the U.S. because of that, which wouldn't be a big deal in itself. But now if all of these flights are getting grounded, they're getting shut down, this continues. A lot of America's income from travel and leisure is domestic spending, honestly.
President Trump says Republicans terminate the filibuster and bring back the American dream. If you don't do it, the Dems will, and you'll never see office again. The administration is so far complying with the court order to fund food stamp benefits during the shutdown, but folks here are still a long ways apart from Democratic holdouts.
I think the SNAP benefits threats shows how important the economy is to national security, and it ironically gives his argument with the Supreme Court a bit more merit. But switching gears to the Canada stuff just to see the inverse of everything that we just watched with the US, we got Mark Carney here, and then Pierre making some good points, calling out things that he used to call out a lot more. I wish he would spend more time on. Let's get into it.
The history of nations, certainly the history of Canada, is punctuated by such times when our actions can be decisive. And we're in one now, to be clear. We're in one now. Technological change is accelerating rapidly. The world has become more dangerous and divided. And that decades-long process of an ever closer economic relationship between Canada and the United States is over. And as a consequence of particularly that last point, many of our former strengths based on our close ties to America have become our vulnerabilities.
Maybe he needs a history lesson like Tim Hodgson gave to Vassie when she asked, I thought we were supposed to be separating from the US. And he said, no, we're continuing on doubling down. We're happy to work with them. And he gave his little history lesson. Here's Mark Carney today proving Tim Hodgson a liar and saying the same things he was before, that they're trying to move away from the United States.
And this is happening fast. This is not a transition, it's a rupture. And it means that our economic strategy needs to change dramatically and rapidly. Above all, we will build Canadian. We'll be our own best customer. With our new Buy Canadian policy, when the government spends, we will select Canadian suppliers by default. No more will over 70 cents of every dollar of Canadian military spending go to the United States.
Once again, doubling down on sticking it to the US, trying to not get a deal instead of using the increased military spending, which is going to be tens of billions of dollars, as leverage, saying, hey, we want to work with you. What if we commit to buying this in military? Let's get a deal done. He goes, nope, we're going to start working with other countries and walk away from getting that deal. But this clip's really funny because he tries to throw Trudeau under the bus and pretend like he wasn't his economic advisor for 4 years.
The fact is that for the last decade, federal spending overall has grown more than 8% year after year. That is twice the rate of growth of our economy. So in this budget, we slash.
Just think about that because it will make sense when we get to the Pierre stuff. The federal spending was twice the growth of the economy. Does anybody think that that possibly could have been inflationary? Now pile in Operation Curry Bomb, all of the mass immigration on top of that. Does anybody wonder why Canada is so much more expensive and the household debt levels grow faster than anywhere else?
Slash direct program spending to just over zero. And we balance the operating budget in 3 years. This will save Canadian taxpayers a total of $60 billion over 5 years by restructuring operations, consolidating internal services, and right-sizing programs.
Once again, I don't know how these guys are just allowed to lie. It does not save Canadians money if you are in massive annual deficits. It's not saving any money.
We are reducing the size of the federal public service by 10%. We are cutting management consultants by 20%. And in parallel, what's freed up from that is capital investments as a share of total spending will more than double from its historic average of 4% to almost 9%. That means over $450 billion in capital investment to help crowd in the private investment that Canada needs.
Mark Carney just admitted that the Liberal government has sewered Canada for 10 years, and no media outlets have run with that. The fact that he said for 10 years, we've been messing up, but we're going to fix it now, and we're going to bring in the private investment that we've scared away for a decade. Proving, once again, this has all been down to bad Liberal management, and Pierre actually doubles down on that as well. Let's get into his clips here.
But Mr. Carney was going to be the tight-fisted banker. He was going to be nothing like Justin Trudeau. He made so many promises. And yet, what has been the results of all these promises? First, he promised that he would negotiate a win with the Americans. By July 21st, he would have a deal. Still no win, still no deal, still no elbows, still no jobs. Here we are, after he promised that he would, quote-unquote, invest more. This week's budget showed that investment has collapsed in all 3 fiscal quarters for which he has been Prime Minister.
Private investment.
He said he'd double home building. Now his government agency, the CMHC, says home building will drop by 13% over the next several years. He's literally doubled the deficit that Justin Trudeau left behind for this year and for the next 5 years. The deficit, as Dan pointed out, this year will be $78 billion, twice the $41 billion that Trudeau had projected, $16 billion higher than Carney promised during the election campaign. And over the next 5 years, the government expects, and this is without any new spending.
This is why it's double funny that the Conservative MP moved over to the Liberal side after being a deficit critic, that he's smashing through every deficit number, and that's when the Conservative MP decided to switch.
In any of those 4 future budgets, they expect to add $1/3 of $1 trillion of additional debt. This will be the most costly 5 years, if it is allowed to happen, in any of Canada's history. And make no mistake, this is not due to the falling revenue from the trade war. It is due to increased government spending.
There you have it. He finally said it. When Pierre gets serious about economic issues, the Liberals cannot hang with him. He does understand the economy more than anyone else on the Liberal side. Mark Carney probably understands more, but he just happens to be a little too evil, and he's trying to destroy Canada. So he said the part out loud. That was the first time. Guys, comment down below if you've heard Pierre say to this point that it was not the results of tariff issues, it was about government spending. Because for a while, both sides were trying to use Trump for all this spending, so it was great to see him change his tune. I like when he keeps on those topics. Here's some more good stuff.
So today, I'd like to present you with a contrasting vision that the Liberals and the Conservatives have on our economy. Let's start with costs and with the fiscal well-being of our people. So we all agree, everyone agrees, that life is too expensive in Canada today. Housing is the most expensive in the G7, for example. Food prices now are prohibitive to the point where people are at food banks. So the question is, how do we make things more affordable?
Please, please, please say immigration at some point, please.
Well, our approach is to address the core problem, which is the government itself. When government runs massive deficits and prints money to pay for it, the resulting increase in the monetary mass bids up the cost of everything you buy. If you have an economy with, say, 10 apples and $10, it's $1 an apple. If you double the dollars to 20, and you still only have 10 apples, you're not twice as rich. It's just that each apple costs twice as much. The money supply has grown from about 1.8 trillion to 2.6 trillion in the last 5 years.
So what Pierre just said makes sense. When you increase the money supply, but you don't increase production, things are going to get more expensive. And the government has been doing essentially unlimited printing over the last 5 years, both at the federal and provincial level. We've seen it with hiring, we've seen it with spending programs, and we also have all of the new money entering the system through mass immigration, which he didn't say in the whole video. I wish he did. He's half right on the calculation. When you have way more money coming in, also way more people coming in, and you don't increase production, you end up with worst case scenario. And the reason that the US is able to operate through that so differently is because they actually produce, and especially with what we're seeing with this re-industrialization, the US prints money, but granted, they are the global reserve currency, so they have to print out and lend quite a bit of money. They always have to carry a higher deficit than Canada. That just makes sense. But even though they have a growing population, which is not growing anywhere near the rate that Canada is on a per capita basis, but they also are able to produce. More products will get created, so that gets absorbed into the system. So to me, that's why it's so interesting that both of these budgets right now, both of these things getting passed, one of which is amazing for America, and the other one, without hyperbole, is going to destroy Canada. So much so that the Bloc Québécois just admitted that they are trying to get Quebec to be a separate country inside of Canada, and I've always complained about that. They're always like, no, we're not Canadian, we're Quebec, we're our own people. The amendment got voted down, but it was the statements that were important. This week, Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet used part of his response to use the budget to reiterate that his party's ultimate goal is to see Quebec separate from the rest of Canada. I believe that Quebecers should be promoting their own major project, he said on Wednesday. That project, of course, in independent Quebec, that is protect, that deserves our vote. It will be called the country of Quebec. That will be our sole identity. Their amendment was basically just Quebec wants more free stuff and climate change. So even though that was never going to pass, it was the statements that were important. But another funny thing is the third confidence vote will be on budget itself. So no more amendments. And it's set to happen as early as November 17th after MPs come back from a break week to commemorate Remembrance Day. So to commemorate Remembrance Day, our entire government needs to go on break for an entire week. They can't tell you what a Canadian is. Heck, some of those MPs aren't even Canadian, but they need to take off an entire week for Remembrance Day after all of the time they took off during this year. That is a hilarious slap in the face of Canadians, especially when going into this budget. And this is why I agree with Fat Ron here, and I'm a certified Ron hater, that heading into 2026, we are going to see insane announcements that will be setting the future of Canada. The Reaper is coming.
Hey, from here on out, for the next 12 months, it's time to pay attention to actual events, to actual things that occur, like all the analysis, all the words, all the charts, all the graphs, all the yammering from politicians, the budget from Champagne, the new ideas from Carney, the babbling from Ford. I mean, like, all that stuff, even...
Some might call it spiraling, but babbling works too.
Even the babbling from Trump, okay? It's what's actually going to happen that's going to count. Events are going to count. Plant closures, shrinking GDP, like real things are going to be important. It's not going to be all the analysis, all the words, all the yammering online, all the crap through all the social media channels, okay? Pay attention to things that actually happen.
Once again, on the difference between Canada and the US, and I've made this point in my videos, we've only seen announcements. So the US has not felt the full benefits of all of the factories coming there, being announced, starting construction, investing in the US. And Canada, unfortunately, has not felt the negative effects of all of the announcements of all of these closures happening. Most of that happens in 2026. That's why I do think 2026 is probably going to be insane. And that's why I think now more than ever, it's time for Canada to smarten up and realize all of the wasted potential. In yesterday's video, I talked about the small win that we finally got in Canada with a huge LNG contract, and what that means moving forward, and what this could mean for how Canada could add value in working with the United States. In all sorts of ways, Fortress America, the union between Canada and the US, could build such a massive economic zone, which is why I wanted the deal to happen while Canada was still in a good spot. We're running out of time, and as we're seeing, by the end of 2026, 2027, there's a world where the US just takes Canada over anyways, because there's only shattered pieces of Canada left. If Quebec leaves, maybe Alberta leaves, who knows what's going to happen if the trajectory is that bad. But it's not over yet. Canada still has all the potential in the world, so let's try and hold the liberal politicians accountable. If you made it this far in the video, you absolutely rock. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We're trying to get these videos out in front of more people. We are trying to grow the channel. If you want to support the channel, you can do it through the link down below. You can also do it directly through YouTube. Thank you, and have a great rest of your day.